You are listening to The Happy Gynecologist with your host, Amanda Miles, MD. Hello, my bees. How are ya? Welcome back to the podcast. If you're just now finding us, welcome. And today we are going to be talking about stuffing our feelings down. Are you a feeling stuffer? Of course you are. You're an OBGYN, right? So what I mean by feeling stuffer is this. You put a pause on your feelings just to kind of get through your day. You go from one room where you've given someone a cancer diagnosis to a newly pregnant patient, maybe to the delivery of an IUFD, to a normal delivery. It's an emotional roller coaster. We have so many ups and downs, y'all. How are you processing this? I know that I used to just ignore it all. I wouldn't allow myself to process it. So do you allow yourself to process this? I would bet not, or you might not be here listening to this podcast. As OBGYNs, we are kind of masters of disguise. You know, we have amazing poker faces. We are very adept at hiding our feelings. We have perfected the way that we handle crazy situations without ever showing emotion or showing that maybe we are nervous or worried or scared. We suck it up and we put our doctor hat on and we take care of business, right? So even if we do have a patient that we cry with, we then immediately suck it up, put our doctor hat on, and talk about the next steps, right? Talk about that suction D&C, or talk about how we're going to induce the IUFD, right? We take a step back, we put some distance between our emotions and our logic, and we discuss the next step of treatment. We just push that pause button. We stuff the grief and the anger and the sadness further and further and further down because we don't have time to deal with that. We have to go on to the next patient who's really excited that they're pregnant. And they aren't going to understand. You can't tell them what just happened, right? We are really good at putting a pause on our emotions and being the best feeling stuffers. I used to be the queen of this. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And some of you may be asking, well, what's wrong with that? Right? I don't have time to feel all those feelings. If I felt all those feelings, I would just go crazy. I wouldn't be able to do my job. I'd be depressed. It's my job to be tough and not show emotion. I'm the captain of this ship, right? That's what I was taught, that's what we were all taught whenever we enter into medicine. We're taught to do no harm, and that in order for us to do that, we have to be logical and not let any icky emotions cloud our judgment. So think back to the first day of medical school. They sent you down to the anatomy lab. This was like lesson number 1 in stuffing your feelings, right? Everybody who has ever gone to anatomy lab, you are, standing around, they're about to let you in, you're anxious, you're nervous. And then you walk in to meet your cadaver, right? Because in medical school, for those that aren't maybe physicians that haven't gone through this, in medical school, we learn so much and we learn all of our anatomy from a deceased person, a cadaver. And so you begin your anatomy dissection on your cadaver. I remember this so clearly. I remember the first day we started muscles on the back, and I remember so vividly. But I also remember that this was definitely a time that you had to set your emotions aside, set all those icky feelings aside, and get to work, right? Most of us had to process this a bit, though, whenever we got home. It's not natural to cut into people, even if it is a cadaver. My medical school had a special program where we actually met with our cadaver's family and we got to know them prior to meeting our cadaver, just to keep it human and to try to retain some of this kind of human element. And it worked. I remember her name. I remember her story. I remember her family. She taught me so much. But this was one of the first lessons that medicine taught me at stuffing my feelings down, keeping those emotions quiet. Because you just do it. You might have big feelings and feel a little or a lot freaked out, but you just do it. This is what you've signed up for. This is what you've worked so hard for. And then you get there, and lesson 1 is how to stuff your feelings. Some of you may have different experiences. And, this, I'm not trying to make this sound like, oh, medical school is horrible. Like, this is an essential part of our job. We have to have this ability to at least pause the feelings and then get the job done and then, move on. But this has also conditioned us to be the feeling stuffers. Okay, so here we are. So, later on in your clinical years, someone lets you hold a scalpel and you get to make that first incision. I remember exactly my first incision. And if you're here, most likely you wanted to do that again. Okay, and you do it again and you do it again. You separate your emotional side from your logical medical side. And as an OBGYN, you probably enjoy that part. Okay, you probably fell in love holding the scalpel. You got a high, you got a dopamine hit, and you were praised for being in that mindset, right? Cool, calm, collected. You were praised for that. And you did well because of it. It served you, right? Because we know as OBGYNs, things can change so rapidly. Everything's good until it's not. And then it's really bad. That's the life of an OBGYN, right? If you let your emotions come into play, one person or even two people might die, right? A mom and a baby. And I think that is true to some extent, that we have to keep our emotions out of this to be, the excellent providers that we are. But what I want to offer you is this. Those emotions aren't just absent or going away whenever we're stuffing them down inside. They are still there. They are still there. They are deep inside you, and they are stored away for later. So let's kind of back up. Okay, if I haven't lost you by now, I'm sure I've lost most of the guys. We're talking about, feelings. Gross. Icky feelings. Emotions. Ugh, don't want to talk about that. Right? I went into this field for a reason. I didn't go into psychiatry. Okay, so let's break it down though. Okay, so those that are still with me here. What is an emotion? What is it? How do you define that? Well, we can define it as a chemical cascade that is triggered by a thought in our brain that leads to a set of feelings or in our body. So a sentence in our brain triggers neurotransmitters to be released that set off a pathway leading to a feeling or an emotion. This is different from sensations. Sensations we feel with our body, and that sends a message to our brain, like hot, cold, pain. Okay, those are sensations. Hot and cold are generated out in our body, and they send a message to our brain. An emotion is generated in our brain and travels out into our body. The best way I can think of to kind of show you this as an example is to think about when you go watch a movie, right? Before COVID, whenever we actually went to theaters, right? If you go to the theater and you watch a scary movie, a horror movie, and you see something on the screen, your brain interprets this as scary. A chemical cascade is then triggered that makes you feel fear. You really feel the fear, even though it is just a movie. It's not real. Your brain knows it's not real. You feel the fear. Your heart races. You want to hide. Maybe you jump with everything that pops out at you. Or maybe the movie you went to see is like one of these tragic romance movies, like one of those based off of Nicholas Sparks' book. You can watch that and you can feel love when this couple is dating and getting married and having this beautiful life together. And then whenever you're watching that and you're thinking like, oh, this is so beautiful, you feel that kind of warm, radiating feeling in your chest and you smile and you feel that love. You do. And then you watch the husband die tragically and you cry and you feel grief sucking in the pit of your stomach and clenched in your throat, right? You feel the grief, even though it's not real. Your brain is watching this movie and thinking about this movie, interpreting it, and it generates a feeling, right? And then you really do feel it in your body, even though you know it's not real. So movies are engineered to do this. And that's, what the best movies do. They make us feel something, right? That's, I think, the goal, right? My husband will probably laugh or scoff at this if he ever listens to this, because he used to get so frustrated with me because I didn't want to watch movies. I was like, I don't like movies. I thought I was a person that didn't like movies, right? He's like, well, what kind of person doesn't like movies? The fact of the matter is I only recently realized this. I used to have a really hard time watching movies because I didn't want to feel the negative emotions that were in them. I didn't want to feel sad. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to feel scared. I didn't know how to process my emotions, period. This is how big of a feeling stuffer I was, is that I wouldn't even watch a damn movie. I didn't know how to process this. I didn't know that you could just feel your emotions and keep going. Like, I was so scared of feeling grief by watching some cheesy movie and then, not even thinking about the fact that the movie ends and it's fake and it's not real. I was just so scared to feel it. I was resisting it. As a feeling stuffer, here's what I would do. I would sit down to watch Up, and I would fast forward through the first 10 minutes of the movie. I don't know if you guys have seen this movie. The first 10 minutes are the usual Disney hitting you right in the feels and telling you this story of this couple's life together from childhood to adulthood, and then she dies. Oh my gosh, y'all. I couldn't even watch the first 10 minutes of Up. This is how big of a feeling stuffer I was. After that, it gets funny, right? So it didn't matter. I could watch that part. So as a recovering feeling stuffer, I want to help you learn to also not stuff your feelings down. Because this was honestly probably the biggest game changer in my process of recovering from burnout. Burnout really hit me hard, I think, because I had so many emotions that I had stuffed down for so long. I'd never addressed any of them. I never acknowledged them. I never exercised to get them out. I never did anything to actually process them. I just avoided them at all costs. And then I used food and alcohol and, scrolling social media and binge watching Netflix. I used all these things as well. So I used other things to help me avoid them as much as possible. And I think a big part of this is that the world teaches us that we should just desire happiness in our lives. Part of the American dream is the pursuit of happiness. People ask, what do you want in your life? You're supposed to just say, I just want to be happy. And we tell our kids even, stop crying, be happy. Don't cry. Why are you upset? We think that the goal is to be happy 100% of the time, but that is not attainable by any human, ever. And the reason is this, that without the negative emotions, the positive ones are meaningless, right? If we don't have the sad times to contrast the joyous times, the joy is much more neutral. It doesn't feel as good. So without the negative, we can't experience the positive in a way that we view as positive. Our brains like to compare. They're really good at this. So, every day we are saying, oh, well, today was really great compared to yesterday. And that's how you kind of judge. You compare the positive to the negative. So when we're told that we need to be happy 100% of the time, we are constantly chasing this happiness. So whenever we start to have a negative emotion, we reach for some sugar, some alcohol, we scroll on our phone, we buy something on Amazon. Any of you guys ever done that? We do all these things to feel better. We reach for something external to us to cover up the negative feelings because, hey, we're supposed to be happy. And if we're not happy 100% of the time, what kind of life are we living? That's what the media tells us. That's what Instagram and Facebook tell us. Everybody's out there living their best lives. Why am I feeling so crummy? Often we will stuff these things down with something that creates a dopamine hit in our brains because dopamine feels good. And we don't want to feel those icky feelings, grief, sadness, frustration, anxiety, overwhelm, all these things. We don't want to feel any of that. We would much rather feel great. So let's get some dopamine. So when I talk about using something to create a dopamine hit in our brains to cover up a feeling, I call that buffering. Much like in a chemistry class, when we are adding a solution to dampen a chemical reaction, we are adding something to generate dopamine so that we can feel better instead of actually feeling the negative emotions that we're experiencing. And we will go much deeper into this buffering thing in the future on different podcasts. I have some really good ones planned for you, but for now, this is what we need to know, is that often whenever we feel something negative, we will reach for something external to us to dampen how we feel, to actually trigger a dopamine release in our brains so that we don't have to feel that. We can just feel some dopamine and feel good about ourselves, okay? Or just feel good. So many docs that I know struggle with this. Some of them even end up struggling with their weight or struggling with overspending or even alcohol. right? Remember the Medscape survey we talked about last time about coping mechanisms that people use? And a lot of them we talked about were not good things. So some people even turn to prescription drugs or other drugs. So buffering is a way of stuffing our emotions. And many of you may not see this as a problem. You're like, yeah, so what? I shop on Amazon. I love shoes. But it may not be a functional issue yet. I want you to ask yourself, are you only shopping on Amazon and buying the shoes whenever you're feeling stressed or bad, or using it as a reward? I know it'll make me feel better. This will make me feel better. Let me go scroll on Amazon and let me find something nice for myself. Let me reward myself. Or, man, that delivery sucked. I totally deserve some wine and some ice cream on the couch tonight while I binge watch Netflix. That's buffering. We're using those things to avoid our negative emotions. And we're just stuffing them further and further down. Eventually, they become an issue. And I think that this is a huge reason for burnout, honestly. So, what we have to realize is that whenever we start talking about our feelings and our emotions, is that in a true, authentic human experience, the kind of split of emotions is closer to be 50-50, positive and negative. It's never going to be 100% positive emotions or happy emotions. It's always going to be closer to 50-50. And that's an authentic life. Okay, so every time you chuckle about something funny your kid says, you may be frustrated while watching them have a tantrum another time, right? It all balances out. So whenever we're stuck on trying to only be happy 100% of the time, we chase that positive feeling. Whenever we start to feel something negative creep in, oh, nope, buffer it, cover it up, stuff it down. After we've stuffed our feelings for long enough, we may notice, man, I had to go up a scrub size, right? So you may notice weight gain. Same thing with alcohol. What started off as a glass of wine on the couch a couple times a week may turn into a bottle of wine several times a week or more. We kind of go down this rabbit hole. And once we start noticing that this might be a problem, we've gained weight, or I'm drinking a lot more than I used to, then we shame ourselves and we judge ourselves and we beat ourselves up and we feel more negative emotions. And then what do? We stuff them down again with more sugar, more alcohol, more overspending, whatever your, buffer of choice is. And this is something that I've had to spend some serious time learning how to deal with, because I definitely used to be the queen of stuffing and the queen of buffering. But I'm here to tell you that this is a secret. You just have to feel your feelings. So the first step in doing this is always just being aware. Being aware that you're even having negative emotions. When I started doing this work, I had a hard time thinking that I was really even feeling anything negative. I'd been stuffing these feelings down so often, so much. I didn't even realize I was feeling it all. Even some of my happy emotions, I would buffer or just not experience as much. I felt numb, really. I felt numb. And medicine teaches us this, it reinforces this. It teaches there's no room for emotions on the field, like the whole, there's no crying in baseball. But all those feelings that you might have stuffed down or buffered away, they're probably there, deep down somewhere. Whether it's from a term IUFD, a maternal loss, an amniotic fluid embolism, if you've ever coded a patient, you've had a 7-minute shoulder dystocia, or a case of true bleeding DIC. If you've ever been in the OR and had the thought, I'm not sure if she's going to leave this OR alive. Unfortunately, I've been a part of most of those. I think probably a lot of you have too. Having even one of these scenarios is enough to generate hundreds of negative thoughts and negative feelings. But once you get off the field, once you get out of the OR, you have to acknowledge and process them. And whenever I say process them, I mean really feeling them and experiencing them. So what I suggest to you is this. Put the emotions in your back pocket. Don't stuff them way down inside. Just put them in your back pocket. Deal with the situation at hand. And when you get home, or to the locker room, or a safe place, take off your scrubs, take the things out of your back pocket and deal with them. Debrief with a partner. That's one way to do this. Call your best OBGYN pal and just verbalize, this is what happened, and I was really scared. Or I just feel broken, and just say the words out loud. Another way to do this would be to write down what happened and all of your thoughts about it. The strength in doing this is that you are acknowledging to yourself what you were feeling. So something that my staff will sometimes hear me say after we have a patient with an SAB in the office, I'll say, I'm just super sad for this family. It's just so sad. And what that does is it allows me to just freaking acknowledge that I'm feeling this negative emotion, allowing myself to go there after something really crazy has happened, bad outcome, or one of those dreaded complications. Oftentimes what I'll do is I'll drive home, I'll park my truck, and then before getting out, I unload my pockets as always, take my badge out, put it in the cup holder, I put my pin there for the next day, and I unload the stack of negative feelings right then and there. Sometimes I call a colleague and just vent for 5 minutes, tell them what happened. Sometimes I just sit and cry, and that's okay. Sometimes there is crying in medicine. Sometimes I will, as I'm unloading my pockets, you always have a face sheet. I'll turn that face sheet over and I'll just scribble the details of everything. I'll just write it out and write, fill the page with everything that happened, everything that I'm feeling, all of the horrible negative feelings, put them out right there on the paper. And obviously, I make a copy of the front of the face sheet before I give it to the biller and shred that copy. But in this way, I am allowing myself to feel the negative feeling, to go there. And you know what? I feel a hell of a lot better. After I've talked to someone or cried or written it all down, I've gotten a lot of those negative emotions that I used to think were really scary. I've gotten them out. I've acknowledged that they're there. So what I don't do is I don't go in the house with all of these feelings stuffed down inside and barely say a word to my family because I'm struggling, and then sit on the couch and eat myself into oblivion or have 2 glasses of whiskey so that I feel better, as a treat because I had a hard day. That's what I used to say. It's not a treat. It is stuffing my feelings down. It is not doing me any good. And my family, I think, is so much more thankful that I'm doing this now because I don't bring in my pocket full of terrible feelings that are just bursting. I'm not trying to hold it in my pocket anymore. I'm letting it out. I'm acknowledging it. And then it's no big deal because those feelings can't hurt me. I used to, I think, be scared that they would, but it's just emotions. And yeah, I still feel crummy sometimes afterwards, but it's not at the intensity that it would be if I just resisted feeling that. If I tried to just stuff it down with food or sugar, I would still feel terrible for days and days. And, doing this, yeah, I feel really terrible about it, but I process it, and I'm much kinder to myself. I have self-compassion in allowing myself to process this afterwards. I find that I don't beat myself up as much. I allow myself just to think it and feel it and be with myself. Once you can feel negative emotions without a problem and realize that they're just that, they're feelings, they're emotions, they can't hurt you. Once you realize that, you will feel in such control of your life. You'll truly begin living an authentic human experience. I can't even explain to you guys that once you are not afraid to feel a negative emotion, once feeling all these feels is no big deal, it's easy. The world opens up. We become courageous. We chase our dreams. We chase our goals. We aren't afraid to fail or be rejected. We take charge of our feelings and of our lives again. We can process our burnout and we can emerge from it like the badasses that we are. And we can love our jobs again. We can be the people and live the lives that we've always wanted. And that is the point. That is why I'm here on this journey to try and help someone else, anyone else, to not have to go through what I did with burnout and to stop having to fight it every day, to stop having to struggle it every day. And this is honestly, I said it and I'll say it again. This has been the biggest game changer for me, is actually learning how to feel my feelings and not be a feeling stuffer. So this is what I want you to work on in this coming week. I want you to allow yourself to feel mad or sad or grief or angry or frustrated or anxious. Pick a negative feeling and plan to feel it. Allow yourself to feel it. Give yourself permission to feel it. Now, you're not like looking to pick a fight or anything like that. I am assuming most of us could find a little shred of negative emotion in our day, right? 50-50, right? 50% of our emotions are going to be negative. So find one and truly feel it, process it. What does it feel like in your body? Close your eyes. What does it feel like? I kind of am into describing my feelings now, because before this, y'all, I never knew what they felt like. I stuffed them down so far. I didn't know that grief was sucking in my chest and clenching in my throat and tears in my eyes. I didn't know that love was a swelling in my chest and it radiates and it feels warm and it makes me smile. I didn't know what those feelings were. I didn't know how to describe them. I didn't know how to feel them. And so hopefully you guys don't think that I am just like this touchy-feely, like woo-woo person now, because I'm not. But honestly, this is where the work is. This is what medicine has trained you to do, and they've trained you so well. You are a great doctor, but medicine has taught us very well how to be feeling stuffers. And so not only are we going to emerge from our burnout, we are going to become recovered feeling stuffers just like me. So that's the goal. I want you guys to practice that this week. And as always, thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you next week. Bye. Thanks for joining me today on The Happy Gynecologist. If you have questions or comments, head on over to my website, coach-miles.com, or follow me on Instagram at CoachMilesMD. I'd also love it if you left me a review on iTunes. See you next week.